Hi, my name is Mark Patton. I'm a mental health and wellness counselor at the University of Ottawa. If you're finding it harder to focus on the things that you want to focus on, like your studies these days, particularly since the beginning of the pandemic, I want to say that this is really normal and a common experience. And it's part of the reason why we wanted to bring this video to you today. So the purpose of the video is to help you better understand some of the mental health aspects of procrastination, and also to offer you some practical strategies that you can use to try to cope with it. And before we get into talking more about these coping strategies and what we can do about it, I wanted to address some of the common myths that we hear around procrastination. So the first thing that I hear from students is that if I'm procrastinating, it must be a sign that I'm weak, that I'm lazy, that I am lacking in willpower. And the reality is that it's really human nature to want to avoid things that are uncomfortable and to seek out distraction as a way of coping with it. The second myth that I hear from students is that it's a sign that I'm flawed, that there's something wrong with me, I have poor self-control. And unfortunately, when we frame it in this way, when we frame it as a personal issue, when we frame it in a way that's about our moral character, it makes it much harder to resolve when in fact it is a really human thing. And we all experience procrastination from time to time. The third myth that here is that it's really about time management. Noor Ayal, who is an expert in the field of procrastination, aptly put that dealing with procrastination is more about pain management than it is about time management. In thinking about procrastination, there are really three things that can draw our attention away from what we want to do. We tend to think of them as external triggers, internal triggers, and some challenges that we might have around planning. So the first one, if we focus on external triggers are really cues in our environment that tell us what to do next. And they're oftentimes the things that really draw our attention away from what we want to do to other things. So examples or common examples of external triggers would be the pings and the buzzes and the screens lighting up on our devices. These things are designed to have us hooked. They're designed to really grab our attention. Other examples of external triggers can be people in our lives, the friends and family who are well-meaning and want to interact with us when it's really important for us to be focused on something that we're working on. So some tips in terms of working with external triggers would be, first and foremost, would be to inform and enlist the people in our lives that we need help from, to say, I'm struggling with distraction. I would like your help. For this period of time, I'm going to be really focused on this, and I really want you to help me out with that. The second thing would be to look at the notifications that we receive on our devices and be really selective about which ones serve us and which ones are really just drawing our attention away to things that aren't so important to us. And along the same vein, another thing that can be really helpful is to get to know the Do Not Disturb button on your devices. That can be really helpful for cutting down external distractions or external triggers. Finally, some of the triggers that we get, some of the external triggers, are actually things that are important to us. So we may be working away on something and an article pops up on a news feed that's actually really interesting for us. And one of the things that can be helpful in managing external triggers is to set aside time for the things that are important to us, to come back to, so that we have a place to read those articles or to spend time with the people that we care about, that we're close to, and so that when we're wanting to be focused on our studies, we really have that time set aside for that. The second factor that sometimes stands in the way of us getting done what we want to do that causes procrastination is internal triggers. So reducing procrastination is oftentimes about learning to deal with the unpleasant or uncomfortable emotions that we're experiencing. If you are to notice the times, if you pay attention to the times when you experience procrastination, you look at what happened right before that, oftentimes there's an unpleasant emotion. We might be feeling anxious because we've set really high standards for ourselves of what we're expecting of ourselves, and that's causing this very high anxiety that makes it hard to focus and hard to get down to what we're doing because the stakes feel just so high. We might be feeling frustrated because we might not have all the information and assignment might not feel clear to us. And that can be a reason why we say, oh, it's just easier if I put it off and do it tomorrow. We might be feeling sad. There might be some other emotions that are coming in that are sort of unrelated to our work as well. So paying attention to those emotions and being able to work through them is really important. Susan David, who's a psychologist and has put a lot of research into working with emotions and has developed a model that she calls emotional agility, talks about the importance of bringing gentle acceptance to those emotions, to be able to show compassion towards ourselves and just to notice and name what we're feeling, and again, show some compassion towards ourselves as if we're the kind of compassion we'd show to a friend who's struggling with an emotion. And sort of being able to say, okay, there is that anxiety there, or there is that frustration there, or there's that other emotion, I'm feeling inadequate. The second part that she would talk about is being able to step outside of the emotion. So being able to create an open and non-judgmental space between your emotions, and to approach your emotional state with curiosity, to try to understand what it's telling you. And by doing this, it gives us the ability to have some choices about what paths we want to follow and how we want to move forward with those emotions. She has a great, one of my favorite quotes is that emotions are data, not directives. So while our urge oftentimes is to either let our emotions dictate what we do, or we bottle them, or we try to avoid them, being able to listen to what they're telling us and then be able to make some choices that move us in the direction that we want to go can be really helpful. So we might think that if we notice that we're having anxiety, one of the choices that we might do a short relaxation exercise or a mindfulness exercise before we get down to our work. Or if we're frustrated because something's not clear, we might try to clarify what the assignment is. Or if we're feeling overwhelmed by it, we might try to break it down to smaller pieces. So by listening to and welcoming that emotion, we can then come up with a bit more of a plan of what we want to do with it. And the final part would be to really examine our values and look at distraction oftentimes brings us away from what's important to us, and recommitting to what's important to us and why we're doing, why we want to go through this discomfort can be really helpful in moving forward. So by looking at our values, it can be like a compass that puts us in the right direction and takes us towards what really matters to us. So there's some other strategies or hacks that you may want to consider in addressing procrastination as well. Tim Pitchell, who's a local expert on procrastination, sometimes advises that people just get started. So keeping actions really small and concrete can be helpful. Part of what he would encourage is don't think too far ahead. Oftentimes when we're trying to plan out a whole project and looking at the big picture, it can be overwhelming, creating anxiety, which then becomes an internal trigger, which makes it much harder to move forward. So don't think too far ahead. Think about what small concrete action will lead to progress and what I'm working on. Other possibilities to consider would be something called time boxing, which many of you may know as tomato clock, which can be helpful when we're feeling overwhelmed or struggling with perfection, and it can create that urgency that inspires creativity for us and breaking things into smaller pieces. Tao is also something that may be of use to you. It's a number of online learning modules that you have access to that have their modules about working with emotions, particularly working with anxiety and study skills. And there's also a mindfulness library, which can be helpful if you are having anxiety about things and that some of those internal triggers that are problematic for procrastination. Also, for University of Ottawa students, I'd like you to consider counselling services where we have walk-in appointments, which are obviously now virtual, but you have access to them. Having an appointment can be useful if you are finding that the internal triggers for procrastination are particularly big or complex, or if the procrastination is accompanied by high anxiety or depression and it's just not seeming to resolve. We're here for you, and we can work with you on helping you through some of these aspects of procrastination. Thank you for watching this video, and please remember, if you need support, don't hesitate to contact us. You can email us at couns@uottawa.ca. And if you're ready to make an appointment, you can book online anytime by visiting our website.